A referee stood 3 feet away and watched a WNBA star drive her fist into Caitlin Clark's throat, and the league didn't blow a single whistle. By the end of this video, you're going to hear about a hidden message stitched into the bottom of a $140 shoe, a coach who was accused of sabotaging her own superstar on live television, and a $28 million company that waited 3.5 years to make a decision that should have taken 3.5 weeks. Stay until the end, because the last piece of this story is the one nobody is talking about yet. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this league is producing more plot twists per week than most TV shows manage in a season, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Let's start with the moment that broke the internet. June 24th, 2026, Gainbridge Fieldhouse, Indianapolis. Indiana Fever hosting the Phoenix Mercury for the second time in 3 days. The first meeting between these two teams 2 nights earlier had already been a war. 6 technical fouls, 1 ejection. Caitlin Clark picked up her 5th technical of the season in that game, and the Fever actually petitioned the league to have it wiped off her record. The league said no. So when these two teams walked back onto the same floor on June 24th, the temperature was already boiling. Clark came out playing like she had something to prove. 19 points, 8 assists in just 20 minutes on the floor, 5 for 9 from the field, 3 for 4 from 3. She was cooking. Then, midway through the second quarter, with about 6.5 minutes left in the frame, Clark went to the floor scrambling for a loose ball. Mercury forward Alyssa Thomas was right there. And what happened next had nothing to do with basketball. Thomas drove her fist into Clark's throat while Clark was still on the ground. No whistle, no foul call. Thomas got up and kept moving like nothing happened. Fever head coach Stephanie White did not hold back afterward. She called the play egregious. She said a referee was standing right there, aware of everything that had happened 2 nights earlier, and still let it slide. She said it was unacceptable, plain and simple. Clark wasn't done getting hit that night either. Later in the game, she was fouled shooting a 3, hit the ground hard, and came up rubbing her back. She left the game in the 3rd quarter with a back injury and never returned. Phoenix held on and won it, 111-109. Now here's where it gets messy. After the win, the Mercury's official account posted a cartoon doodle of a player lying on the floor with the caption, "Dewana piece of this," a reference to Mercury veteran Dewana Bonner, who'd had a triumphant and won moment earlier in the game. The team's explanation was that it was a tribute to Bonner, not a shot at Clark. But the timing was brutal. Clark had just gone down in almost the exact same position after taking a fist to the throat, and thousands of fans read the post as mocking her. The backlash was instant and loud enough that the Mercury quietly deleted it. Weirdly, the moment from that whole 2-game stretch that refuses to die on social media isn't even the fist to the throat. It's a completely different clip from the first game, 2 nights earlier, where Fever guard Sophie Cunningham silently pointed her finger at Bonner during a scuffle with a dead serious poker face. That single frame turned into a nationwide meme within hours, with fans campaigning to turn it into the league's next logo. Basketball can break your heart and turn you into a meme in the same week. Keep that in mind, because it tells you exactly how fast this league's internet moves. And that speed is about to matter a lot more than you'd think. The next day, the league finally acted. They upgraded the Thomas foul to a flagrant 2, calling it a non-basketball act, and suspended her for 1 game with a fine. Fever team president Kelly Krauskopf said player safety has to be paramount in this league. And that's when the story split in 2 directions. Mercury head coach Nate Tibbetts stood up for Thomas publicly, calling her one of the toughest competitors in the game and pushing back hard on how the league reached its decision. It's worth knowing that Thomas has been playing for years with permanent ligament tears in both shoulders, grinding through a schedule that barely gives WNBA players time to recover between the domestic season and overseas play. That context doesn't excuse a fist to the throat, but it's part of who she is as a competitor. Here's the part that a lot of people missed once the news cycle moved on. In the days after the suspension, Alyssa Thomas said she started receiving death threats and racist messages online. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert eventually put out a statement condemning that abuse. So this isn't just a story about a superstar getting hit. It's a story about a league that couldn't get the call right in real time, and then couldn't fully control what happened once the internet got involved. Stick with me, because that exact tension, the league versus the moment, shows up again just a few weeks earlier, and this time it's coming from inside Clark's own locker room. Rewind to late May, about a month before the Thomas incident. The Indiana Fever are still finding their footing, and they walk into a game against the Portland Fire, one of the league's two brand-new expansion franchises. Indiana jumps out to an 8-2 lead early in the first quarter. Then, head coach Stephanie White makes a substitution that changes the entire trajectory of the season's narrative. She pulls Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Lexi Hall all at once, early in the first quarter, while Indiana is still winning. Portland responds with a run that flips the game completely. By the time the quarter ends, Portland is out front and never looks back. Indiana loses by 16, 100-84. That alone would have been a one-day story, but then a video started circulating. During a timeout, cameras caught White standing over Clark, animated, gesturing at her. Clark threw her hands up in visible frustration. White then called rookie Raven Johnson over to take Clark's spot in the huddle. Clark got up, walked away, and shook her head. The clip spread everywhere. Some fans accused White of deliberately undermining her own franchise player. A few even claimed the footage was AI-generated because of a strange blue shape near the edge of the frame. That turned out to just be Clark's bench seat cushion, and the video was confirmed authentic. Analysts piled on, questioning why a superstar playmaker would get pulled that early in a game Indiana was winning. Clark finished with just 6 points on 1 for 7 shooting in 22 minutes, one of the roughest nights of her career. 2 days later, both Clark and White addressed it directly. And this is where you start to understand why Clark has handled 3 years of relentless scrutiny without cracking. She said flatly that she rides for Steph, that she rides for her teammates, and that nobody inside the building thought twice about what happened. She talked about crying in White's arms after getting hurt during a game the year before, and called her someone she'll be loyal to for the rest of her life. White backed it up from her side too, framing it as normal coaching, and made an observation that landed harder than people expected, that this kind of moment almost never becomes a headline when it happens in men's sports. A teammate later admitted publicly that she didn't fully agree with how Clark reacted in the moment, but confirmed the relationship between Clark and White was never actually in question. And here's the twist nobody saw coming. After all that noise, the Fever went out and won 4 straight games. And when the Alyssa Thomas incident happened weeks later, it was Stephanie White standing up the loudest in Clark's defense, the same coach fans wanted fired a month earlier. If you think that's the last time this season a coaching decision turns into a national conspiracy theory, keep watching, because we haven't even gotten to what Clark is doing statistically, and the numbers are about to sound made up. While all of this chaos was playing out around her, Clark was quietly rewriting the WNBA record book in real time. Through her first 13 games of the 2026 season, Clark had 265 points and 108 assists, making her the fastest player in league history to reach 250 points and 100 assists in a single season, clearing the old record by 3 full games. She wasn't done. Earlier in the year, in the Fever's season opener, she became the fastest player ever to reach 1,000 career points, 250 rebounds, and 250 assists combined, doing it in just 54 games and beating a mark previously held by 6-time Olympic champion Diana Taurasi by 8 games. She also became the fastest player in league history to hit 500 career assists. Her per-game numbers back it all up. She was averaging a career-high 21.2 points per game on efficient shooting, plus 8.2 assists and 4 rebounds a night. In one stretch, she scored 76 points combined across a week's worth of games, the most in the Eastern Conference and the second most league-wide over that span, while adding 20 assists and 13 rebounds. That performance earned her a Player of the Week award, her 4th career selection, tying her with franchise legends Katie Douglas and Kelsey Mitchell, trailing only the great Tamika Catchings in franchise history. And remember, this isn't a clean, uninterrupted climb. Her sophomore season in 2025 was wiped out by quadriceps and groin injuries that limited her to just 13 appearances. Even hurt and playing a third of a season, fans still voted her in as an all-star captain with a record-breaking number of votes, more than any player in league history had ever received. That's how strong the pull of this player is, even when she's not on the floor. Coming into 2026, the question was whether she could return to full health. Not only did she answer that question, she blew past it. As of this year's All-Star announcement, Clark has been named a starter for the 3rd consecutive season, joined in the Fever backcourt by teammate Kelsey Mitchell, with the Fever contributing 3 total starters to the game. In between all of that, Clark also made her senior debut for Team USA at the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying tournament in San Juan, Puerto Rico, back in March. Her first competitive action in 8 months after a groin injury the year before. She dropped 17 points and 12 assists in her very first game in the jersey, the second most assists ever recorded in a qualifying game at that level. Team USA went a perfect 5-0, and Clark walked away with tournament MVP honors, averaging 11.6 points and 6.4 assists a game. It was another reminder that even coming off one of the most injury-riddled years of her career, she doesn't need long to look like herself again. But here's the number that should actually worry you. Over one 4-game stretch in the middle of the season, opponents specifically targeted Clark on 34 isolation possessions, the most by any player over a 4-game span in 3 seasons. That's not random physicality. That's a scouting report. Teams are building entire defensive game plans around wearing her down one-on-one, possession after possession, night after night. And by this point in the season, she'd already picked up 5 technical fouls, at least one of which the Fever felt was completely unjustified. The league denied the appeal. Stephanie White's message through all of this has stayed consistent. She's never asked for Clark to get special treatment. She's asked for consistent treatment in how games are officiated and in how Clark specifically is officiated. After the Thomas incident, she said it plainly. When the same pattern keeps repeating itself over and over, eventually it gets frustrating. Clark herself has handled the physicality question with more nuance than almost anyone expected from a 24-year-old under this much pressure. She's openly acknowledged the privilege that comes with being a white player in a league where conversations about race run deep. And she said she doesn't believe she's personally being targeted because of it. Instead of feeding the culture war, she keeps redirecting the conversation back to basketball. That restraint might be the most underrated skill in her entire game. And speaking of restraint, wait until you hear how long the biggest shoe company on the planet made her wait for something LeBron James got within 7 months of turning pro. The $28 million mistake. In April of 2024, Caitlin Clark signed an 8-year, $28 million endorsement deal with Nike. At the time, it was the richest shoe deal any WNBA player had ever put her name on. The expectation was simple. Move fast, capitalize on a player who was already a household name before she'd played a single professional game. Nike did not move fast. For more than 3.5 years after that deal, Clark had no signature shoe. There was a Caitlin Clark colorway of an existing shoe released in 2025 that became one of the most worn shoes in the NBA that season, but it wasn't hers. It was someone else's design wearing her colors. Meanwhile, everyone else cashed in. She was moving product for Gatorade, Panini, Stanley, and Wilson, whose CEO called her launch the most successful in basketball since Michael Jordan. Everybody was profiting from Caitlin Clark, except the one company that had paid $28 million for exclusive rights to her feet. Then Sonny Vaccaro spoke up. If you don't know the name, you should. He's the man who signed Michael Jordan to Nike back in 1984. The single decision that built the entire Jordan brand and turned Nike into the biggest sports company on the planet. When Vaccaro talks about sneaker business, the industry listens. He told ESPN that Nike's handling of Clark ranked among the biggest failures he had ever witnessed. He argued Clark arrived at the WNBA already more of a known commodity than Jordan was when he entered the NBA, and that the public had grabbed onto her like no other athlete before. He pointed to LeBron James getting his first signature shoe by Christmas of his rookie year, just 7 months after Nike won the bidding war for him as a high schooler. Clark had waited years longer than that. Reporting from ESPN's Dan Wetzel found that in all of 2026, before the shoe finally dropped, Nike and Nike Basketball's own social accounts had posted about Clark barely a handful of times, and that outside of one national commercial, the promotional push around her had been almost non-existent, especially compared to how the company has historically marketed its male stars. Finally, on June 17, 2026, Nike ended the wait. A 4-word teaser hit social media, coming to a logo near you. The Caitlin one was official, set to release October 1st at $140. Clark had spent the week leading up to it running a masterclass in her own promotion, changing her social handles, teasing the release date on a bracelet, showing up to games in outfits that hinted at the shoe's colorway. Every detail was calculated, and every detail worked. The shoe itself is built around 3 words Clark specifically asked for: speed, range, and unpredictability. It uses a construction technology Nike has never put into a basketball shoe before, designed to reduce drag and speed up movement for exactly the kind of quick direction changes and deep pull-up shooting that define her game. There's even a hidden detail on the outsole, a personal mantra you only see if you flip the shoe over. It was never a long shot. An 18-piece apparel line launches alongside the shoe on release day, including jackets, hoodies, and performance tees, built to be sold in a full range of sizes down to preschool. Clark becomes the 5th current WNBA player with a signature shoe deal, joining Angel Reese with Reebok, Breanna Stewart with Puma, and Sabrina Ionescu and Asia Wilson with Nike. But none of those launches carried 3.5 years of built-up frustration behind them the way this one did. Think about that gap for a second. Nike signed her before she'd even played a junior season at Iowa. She then went on to become the most watched player in the history of women's college basketball, entered the league as the #1 overall pick, and by the time her shoe finally hit shelves, she'd already been a professional for 2 full seasons. LeBron didn't wait that long. Kobe didn't wait that long. Nobody Nike has ever built a brand around waited that long. And the timing could not have been more poetic or more brutal. The Alyssa Thomas incident happened exactly 1 week after that shoe announcement. Clark went from the biggest off-court moment of her career straight into a fist to the throat and a back injury. Every high in this season has come paired with an immediate low. Now here's the part of this story that almost nobody is connecting, and it changes how you should think about everything you just heard. Back when Clark was still at Iowa, her college coach Lisa Bluder did something that ended up shaping how Clark handles everything that's happened since. Bluder went back and reread the 1995 book Sacred Hoops. Phil Jackson's account of coaching Michael Jordan through the isolation and pressure of being the most famous athlete on the planet. This time, she read it with a highlighter, marking every passages that reminded her of Clark. There were a lot of them. The isolation that came with Jordan's fame, the way it separated him from teammates, the specific mental framework it took to survive that kind of scrutiny. Bluder started sharing those highlighted pages with Clark directly on road trips. And Clark read them, not because she was told to, but because she recognized herself in them. Bluder later said the same things Phil Jackson had to help Jordan work through were some of the same things she felt she had to help Clark navigate. The lesson that stuck the most: always talk about your teammates before yourself. You can hear it in every interview Clark gives. She deflects credit constantly. She keeps the spotlight on her team, even when every camera in the building is pointed only at her. The comparisons don't stop there. Wilson Sporting Goods has directly compared her commercial impact to Jordan's. Vaccaro said flat out she entered the league as a bigger known commodity than Jordan was. And insiders around her college program have pointed out that only 2 players in the sport are doing what she does from the logo: her and Steph Curry. Full stop. But the most important parallel is the hardest one. Both Jordan and Clark faced relentless physical targeting early in their careers from opponents who couldn't match their skill any other way. Both had to build the toughness to absorb that punishment and keep performing at an elite level anyway. Jordan eventually answered every doubter with 6 championships. Clark's story is still being written, but if the early chapters are any indication, betting against her has not been a smart move so far. Here's where we land. The 2026 WNBA season just expanded to 15 teams. Television ratings keep climbing, arenas keep selling out, and Caitlin Clark sits at the center of almost all of it, whether the league wants her there or not. The Thomas suspension was probably the right call. It also came a full day too late, after the internet had already decided the league didn't care. The officiating inconsistencies that Stephanie White has called out over and over point to a league that still hasn't figured out how to protect its biggest draw in real time. And the fallout afterward, the death threats directed at Thomas, the commissioner having to step in and condemn abuse, shows just how fast this entire ecosystem spirals once a single missed whistle hits social media. Clark herself keeps doing the one thing that's actually working. She's not demanding special treatment. She's not playing the victim. She's averaging 21 points and 8 assists a game, defending her coach publicly, acknowledging her own privilege honestly, and letting her game speak louder than any hot take ever could. She's doing all of that while absorbing more contact, more scrutiny, and more attention than any player in the history of this league. And she's doing it in a shoe that took a $28 million company 3.5 years too long to make, with a message hidden on the bottom that says it was never a long shot. Maybe for her, it wasn't. Maybe this is exactly where she was always headed. The exact intersection of talent and controversy that Jordan sat at 30 years ago, carrying an entire league on her back, whether it's ready for the weight or not. Because here's the thing nobody's saying out loud yet. The Fever still have a brutal back half of the schedule left. They're facing one of the league's true powerhouses again in a matter of days. And Clark's back injury from that Mercury game has never fully gone away. If it flares up again during a playoff push, this entire season, the record chase, the shoe launch, the coaching drama, all of it gets rewritten in an instant. The next month of Fever basketball might end up mattering more than everything you just watched combined. So here's the real question. Is the WNBA actually built to protect the player who's carrying its entire growth on her shoulders? Or is it just along for the ride until something breaks? Type your answer below. And if you want to be here the moment this story takes its next turn, make sure you're subscribed. Because based on how this season has gone so far, it's not slowing down anytime soon.